A couple months ago, Trials report listed Khepri Sting as the best exotic amongst hunters in Trials of Osiris. More specifically, I mean within the top 10% of Trials players, literally the most successful players there are, Khepri Sting was the most used exotic by hunters. Now hearing that may make some people raise an eyebrow because not long ago Khepri Sting was not very popular among players, but it slowly began trending within the higher skill band and soon became commonplace for successful hunters in Trials. Since then, Khepri Sting's exotic effect underwent a rework taking place in the Lightfall update alongside a bunch of other changes which I cover in this video. And soon after these changes going live with the release of Lightfall, I took the liberty of putting these reworked Khepri Sting gauntlets to use with the also revamped mod system and formulated our first build to showcase here on the channel. Many people think Nightstalker is a dead subclass, but as a lifelong Nightstalker main, I'm here to prove that that's not true and teach you the ways of a true Nightstalker. This prefaces the presentation of the build because you can't just have a build, it's important you know how to use it as well. So let's start off with what a Nightstalker or a Void subclass hunter is capable of and what I feel like they're intended to accomplish. When people envision Void hunters, they probably usually think invisibility. And although that is true, I feel like it's also misleading because there's a lot more to Void hunters than just that one attribute. As a matter of fact, invisibility is just a single component of the bigger picture. Instead of just invisibility, I think the overall theme you should keep in mind when it comes to Nightstalkers is misdirection and disorientation. These are two somewhat overlapping concepts in which one may lead to another, but they go hand in hand in making what I feel is the true bread and butter behind a good Nightstalker. Starting off strong, one of our best friends in this build and the basis for a lot of the building we've done, the Snare Smoke Bomb. The Smoke Bomb is dubbed with Snare for a good reason. It perfectly plays into the theme of Nightstalker Hunter because it really does act like a snare. For those who don't know, this is the melee ability of this particular Nightstalker subclass, as every subclass will typically have, of course, a super, but then also a melee, a grenade, and then some aspects and fragments that can add or modify abilities within the subclass. And that is exactly what we're gonna do here. We're gonna use aspects, fragments, exotic armor, and armor mods to enhance our Snare Smoke Bomb and also add in some additional features or synergies to pair with the Smoke Bomb and balance out its neutral game. So more specifically, the Snare Bomb reads, throw a smoke bomb which attaches to a surface and pings enemy radar, weakens targets on detonation. The first big part of that effect is the pings enemy radar portion. This single phrase introduces a whole new attribute to the build that is incredibly important and extremely underrated. Essentially, wherever you throw your smoke bomb, it will plant on that surface and periodically put out false radar pings that look like this. Just like the typical radar ping from a player. Now you may be thinking back to what I mentioned earlier if you remember what I stated the overarching goal of the subclass truly is, and realizing this is what I meant. It's very easy to use the smoke bomb purely offensively or perhaps in a panic attempting to evade an opponent, but so much of the value of the smoke bomb lies in the snare aspect of it and having the discipline to capitalize on its utility. The ability to send out those false radar pings from anywhere you might have a line of sight and continue to send them out over time due to the duration of the snare as you maneuver the map is invaluable. It provides the perfect tool to misdirect, disorient, and ultimately manipulate your opponent in the midst of almost any given engagement. The second portion of the smoke bomb description mentions that affected enemies are afflicted with the Weaken effect, which is exclusive to Void subclasses and provides a plus 7.5% incoming damage debuff. Obviously, a distributable debuff is good in general, but our first bit of synergy comes from the interaction of the smoke with our first aspect, Stylish Executioner. Stylish Executioner states, defeating a weakened, suppressed, or volatile target grants invisibility and true sight. This brings up another major component of the build, true sight. True sight is a temporary buff that grants the ability to see the silhouette of enemies through visible barriers up to 64 meters away. So essentially, it's a brief period of wall hacks, and it is most definitely as busted as it sounds, but it does have an activation cost to help balance it out. Nonetheless, this is a major component of the build that we're going to capitalize on to set it apart from other Nightstalker builds by using an exotic to further lean into both our smokes and our ability to proc true sight. Lo and behold, the Khepri Sting exotic gauntlets. Khepri Sting possesses the exotic trait Touch of Venom. which states, punching someone with full melee energy will instantly cast Smoke Bomb. Your Smoke Bombs deal increased damage, regenerate more quickly when stuck to a surface, and grant true sight after damaging the target. And for some more specific numbers, the Smoke Bomb will deal approximately 40% more damage, and when stuck to a surface will regenerate at 500% increased rate or 6 times the base rate. But most importantly, on top of those benefits, Smoke Bombs gain the additional functionality of activating true sight when making contact with enemies. These attributes we've covered so far form the main synergistic gameplay loop, which has some flexibility in being able to either throw the smoke bomb in your enemy's immediate radius to directly activate it, or set it up nearby as a trap and perhaps make use of those false radar pings to confuse them. Once the smoke bomb triggers on the enemy, Khepri Sting's exotic trait will activate and grant you true sight for 3 seconds, then allowing you to use that additional information as well as the weaken effect to secure a kill, immediately proccing Stylish Executioner and granting you true sight once more. This allows you to follow up on a potential second engagement or simply collect intel on the enemy positions for you and your team. In the instance another enemy is nearby, this is where our class ability of choice comes into play, Gambler's Dodge, which based on the name I would argue is a Cade specialty. Gambler's Dodge will completely replenish your melee charge if used in somewhat close proximity to an enemy. This can be taken advantage of even easier when True Sight is active because you can see the enemy's exact location. This gives you the potential to throw out 2 smoke bombs back to back by using your dodge to grant you a second one. To take this even further, I utilized our second aspect slot to incorporate Vanishing Step, which provides invisibility after dodging. Invisibility in itself is a fairly complex system that has some rules to it, so it could be beneficial to check out a video from somebody else that discusses it more thoroughly, such as outweigh. But the gist is that certain actions will disrupt the effectiveness of invisibility. Invisibility will remove you off of enemy radars, but actions such as beginning to sprint or using a jump other than your first jump will briefly reveal your position on the radar, while still keeping your character model cloaked. This provides a sort of veil of safety in a situation where you're close up to the enemy and you're trying to make use of your Gambler's Dodge. And as of right now, there is some insane potential for maneuvers with only these tools at our disposal. For example, if you're in fairly close quarters with an enemy or multiple, you could throw smoke off to the side in one direction in between you and your enemy to put out false pings and confuse them. Then you could dodge to proceed to go invisible, which removes you from the radar and replenishes your smoke. Then you could choose to either outright go for the kill or throw your second smoke in the opposite direction of your first, creating 2 distractions. Then simply crouch to remove yourself from the radar and instead appear periodically, just like a smoke would. For this final option, our first fragment of choice would come into play, Echo of Dilation, which not only provides useful stat benefits, but also makes your crouch walk faster and increases the resolution of your radar while crouching, adding more panels to more precisely pinpoint enemies. This would create a scenario where you have 2 decoys showing up on the enemy's radar right when you disappear from it and will only show back up looking like one of the decoys. This creates enough confusion to close the gap or find an angle with your enhanced crouch walk and secure a kill. That is 3 different ways you could approach just a single engagement, and if that was difficult for you to follow it all, imagine how hard it would be for your opponent. All of this decision making takes place in a matter of seconds, and with so many possibilities and depth provided by the build, there is almost always a way to catch your enemy off guard. The only limit is your imagination, and at times it can make Destiny more like a game of chess. But as you master navigating your arsenal and all of these possibilities, you become increasingly fluent in the heat of battle and can easily become an unsuspecting force to be reckoned with. But for the most part, everything so far has been utility based, so what more goes into actually killing your opponent rather than just confusing and poisoning them? Well, I have some particular weapons of choice that were chosen very carefully and methodically. As I am a Nightstalker main, I have a favorite legendary weapon that falls within one of my favorite primary weapon archetypes and is tailored specifically for the Void subclass. That is this unusual seeming yet beautifully godrolled Stars and Shadow. It's not even a crafted weapon, nor an adept one, just an extremely well-tailored Stars and Shadow, and I'll tell you what makes it so great. This roll comes with a choice of barrels specializing in range or stability, in which I opted for stability through the polygonal rifling. Next, we have the Tactical Mag perk, staying true to its name and providing benefits in all stability, reload speed, and mag size. Then for the weapon traits, firstly I have Elemental Capacitor, whose benefits vary depending on which subclass you have active. Why this is desirable on the Void subclass is because it grants plus 20 stability. Stability is important because it manages the height of the recoil on the weapon, how much and how long your accuracy remains bloomed out during extended firing of the weapon, as well as how much flinch you receive while wielding the weapon. This high impact frame archetype of pulse rifles comes with inherently high range, so with my plus 10 granted from my masterwork, it's safe to say that it's worthwhile to invest in stability beyond that. So our range is looking good and our stability is looking really good, but in contrast to the stability, our handling is looking horrendous, and I'm no fan of a sluggish weapon. The handling stat is in charge of how quickly you draw your weapon, your draw speed, how quickly you stow your weapon, your stow speed, and how quickly you aim down sights on a weapon, or ADS. These speeds can be further increased by external modifiers that apply a multiplier to the speeds dictated by your handling. Some of these external modifiers are things like dexterity mods typically found on gauntlets, targeting mods typically found on helmets, and potentially perks like threat detector. All of these modifiers will stack on top of the effects of the handling stat, so even if a weapon is at max handling, the varying speeds can still be further increased respectively. I fully take advantage of this by using quick draw as my second perk on Stars and Shadow. According to Destiny Item Manager, upon readying a weapon, quick draw will grant it 100 ready and stow speed, which is just like having max handling but without any of the ADS speed benefits, and a 0.95 times ready animation duration multiplier for 1 second or until ADS. The 0.95 times multiplier is one of the external modifiers that I just mentioned, and essentially acts like a 5% increase that stacks with the 100 ready and stow speed. Basically, this perk does it all to make your draw and stow speed, quote unquote, unbelievably fast, and it makes our very low handling stat of 23 incredibly deceptive. So our range and stability stats are well above average, and so are the effects of our handling stat, even though it doesn't quite show. Our handling is practically maxed out at or beyond 100, despite the fact that quick draw doesn't affect ADS speed, which can be fixed with targeting mods on our helmet. Lastly, we slapped on a counterbalance mod in the mod slot to get Stars and Shadow to a healthy value of 79. Just to iterate how stupidly valuable that stat package is, allow me to compare this legendary rifle to the many times nerfed and community beloved exotic pulse rifle, No Time to Explain. You can see that although it has a lower base range value, it actually has a slightly higher zoom value, which also affects the damage fall off range as well as some other factors. Then you can see how with elemental capacitor active, Stars and Shadow actually beats out No Time to Explain in the stability department by a considerable margin, and as we established earlier, stability is very valuable. Next we have the handling stat on Stars and Shadow, which sits at a pseudo maxed out level where its draw and stow speed will far surpass anything No Time to Explain can do on its own. And lastly, the recoil direction stat sits at a just slightly more comfortable level than No Time to Explain. All in all, being an exotic, No Time to Explain already has considerably high base stats for its archetype, and the fact that Stars and Shadow beats it out in a handful of ways is quite remarkable, which is what makes it such a great candidate for this Void build. Another thing to note is that Stars and Shadow being a legendary weapon leaves room for a different exotic to be used alongside it, in which I went with the all-reliable Chaperone. Chaperone is a standout pick because with the new mod system, I couldn't attain my old triple 100 stat package with this gear. Instead, I managed tier 8 mobility, tier 6 resilience, per usual for me on the hunter, max or tier 10 recovery, and a modest 85 out of 100 or 8 tiers of strength. Now, mobility is what affects our dodge recharge, and strength is what affects our powered melee recharge, which in this case is our smokes. So it's safe to say both are fairly important stats, yet I can't manage to get either to a max of 100 or tier 10 with this gear. Due to this, I made a conscious decision to settle at 8 tiers of mobility because Chaperone secretly falls into the lightweight frame archetype, which provides an invisible bonus of 2 tiers of mobility and 6.25% extra sprint speed while the weapon is in hand. This will allow our movement and dodge to behave as though we're maxed out on mobility. Furthermore, if I just had 2 more pieces of artifice armor slotted in, I could squeeze out an extra tier of strength for our smokes, but tier 8 will be sufficient as we're still getting a measurable bonus to our recharge rate. So Chaperone is serving to help complete our stat package, but also is still a very good slug shotgun for PvP and amongst the best. It has a competitive one-hit kill range at approximately 12 meters, very healthy handling compared to a lot of legendary slug shotguns, and provides extra speed to close the gap. It's important that both Stars and Shadow and Chaperone have healthy ready and stow speeds because it allows you to swap between them at a moment's notice and really give you more time to react by lining up a headshot rather than being stuck in swap animations. Slug shotguns are not as popular as pellet shotguns, but there's a lot of merit to opting into using a slug and being able to use them well. Not only do you have the opportunity to get one-hit kills at almost double the range, but with the second fragment we have equipped, it will also allow us to incorporate some new synergy into the build. Echo of Leeching is a fragment that starts health regeneration for you and your allies upon getting a melee final blow. Not only does this apply for smokes at a distance, but this can synergize with an often forgotten part of Khepri's Sting. If you recall, Khepri's Sting will instantly cast your smoke bomb when you use an uncharged melee attack on an opponent while possessing a full melee charge. This allows me to take advantage of the notorious shotgun melee combo in a very unique way. If we hit a non-lethal chaperone shot at a target within its range, it will prime the target for a follow-up melee to secure the kill. Due to this fragment, finishing the target with a melee while we have a smoke bomb fully charged will result in immediate health regeneration, not only for me but for my allies as well, and also cast the smoke bomb alongside the melee, producing its damaging cloud of gas but also granting us true sight for dealing damage with it. In just a matter of seconds, it's possible to run down an opponent with a swift shotgun melee combo and come out of it perfectly primed for another engagement due to the immediate health regeneration and true sight intel. All the meanwhile, the trusty Stars and Shadow is handy for any cleanups or mid to long range engagements. For our grenade of choice, we've got the Void Spike Grenade because not only does it have great utility at angles and high damage output, but it also possesses the second fastest cooldown. That brings us to our last two fragments, which are Echo of Remnants, which extends the duration of the Spike Grenade, and Echo of Obscurity, which is being used only and entirely for its stat bonus of plus 10 recovery. Recovery is an expensive stat, and I gained an extra fragment slot for using Vanishing Step instead of Trapper's Ambush, so it just felt right to use it to help me reach my desired stats. Moving on to the armor mods, let's first take a look at the helmet. I'll ignore the first column stat mods for most of these, so aside from that, we've got 2 solar targeting mods and 1 kinetic targeting mod. How stacking mods often works in D2 is that the first instance of the mod will provide its full value for targeting mods that would be 10, and then every instance after that would be halved. So since we have 2 solar targeting mods, we're gaining plus 15 aim assist on Stars and Shadow, as it's a solar weapon. Then our single kinetic targeting mod will provide the basic plus 10 to the aim assist on our chaperone since it is a kinetic weapon. Moreover, targeting mods also grant an ADS speed bonus through a multiplier that cuts down the ADS speed, so with each identical mod equipped, diminished returns are had at increments of 50%. Next up are the Gauntlets, in which we have the new and improved melee kickstart mod, which will refund a small chunk of melee energy upon the use of a charged melee, which are also stackable with diminished returns. This one is pretty straightforward as it just helps us get closer to having our smoke bombs again after using it. Then we have fastballs to improve the throw distance and trajectory of our choice of grenade, and finally for the arms, impact induction, which will help us charge our grenade anytime we are dealing melee damage. This is especially potent because we have a melee centric build and very low discipline stat sitting at tier 2, where discipline directly influences the recharge rate of our grenade, and this mod helps us circumvent the downside of having low discipline simply by being able to use our melee frequently. Furthermore, it's important to note that the portion of Khepri Sting's exotic trait that provides increased regeneration rate while the smoke bomb is undetonated will not work if you proc invisibility from Vanishing Step or the other aspect on Nightstalker Trapper's Ambush, and it's uncertain if this is a bug that's going to be fixed in the future or not. Next, on the chest armor, we used double solar and flinching mods for the Stars and Shadow, which also have diminished returns, and a single kinetic unflinching mod for the chaperone. On our legs, we have stacks on stacks mod so we can pick up orbs to charge our armor charge, as well as double the charge when we do. Then we spend that armor charge by having the solar surge mod equipped, giving us a slight damage buff for our Stars and Shadow. These mods aren't mandatory and were sort of just me filling up empty space, but you can put anything here. These are just particularly useful for me. Lastly, on the cloak we have the outreach mod that refills melee energy on class ability activation, which in our case is our dodge. Then a utility kickstart mod also refunding a portion of our dodge on activation. Following that is a reaper mod which allows us to create orbs by getting kills after dodging and charge up the solar surge on our legs for a damage boost. Overall, this build provides some serious options, an incredible neutral game, mental depth that may just exceed some of the ape-like titans out there, and security in a playstyle that boils down to your mastery of it. It achieves the main goal I established for a Nightstalker by having multiple avenues for misdirecting and disorienting your opponent, but it also has the added benefit of heavily leaning into an incredibly useful ability like True Sight, frankly providing intel and reconnaissance while you're taking it away from your enemies, allowing you to properly hunt them as a hunter should. Although invisibility, snare smoke bombs, and even crouching are all tremendously powerful tools in manipulating your opponent's radar and their awareness, Hunter's access to True Sight and the benefits of Khepri Sting are equally valuable and deadly. It is the tactical practice of using the culmination of all of the tools that will result in you being able to poison the mind of your enemy during a fight and find the right moments to strike. And that is it for this build video. I'm hoping it is going to be the first of many, so please, if you enjoyed the video, show some love by liking it or even letting me know in the comment section. I love build crafting and I have some serious favorites that I can't wait to share with you all. If you're looking forward to that sort of content or even just want something more chill like a stream, you can catch all of that here as we do both weekly streams and videos here on the channel, so definitely stick around and subscribe for more banger builds or to simply come hang and chat. Nonetheless, we've got more content on the horizon, so stay tuned. Until then, peace out.
500 strat. It's called get your head on this. Be the first on this side. And die. But I can like rush their spawn super.
God, yeah.
I'll be God. I'll be I was fucking love.
That was pretty. Sight. Gotcha.
Oh yeah, baby.
Really?
Oh.